On in the programme. It's 20 minutes past 4.
BBC Radio 5 Live.
This is the voice of the UK.
5 Live Drive.
With Chris Warburton and Claire McDonnell.
Listen on BBC Sounds.
Now, police officers say they've identified a significant number of people who they consider persons of interest in the criminal investigation into the post office scandal. A national team has now been established, made up of 100 officers. Dozens of people involved with the post office and Fujitsu are being looked at by the police, although just 3 have been interviewed under caution so far. Officers have also told the BBC not to expect any criminal trials before 2027. Commander Stephen Clayman is in charge of the operation. He said the police were working as quickly as possible.
At the moment, we've got over 1.5 million documents that we're reviewing. Now, consider that each document contains pages of material, so it's a huge undertaking. Hence, we need a larger team to continue. This is an investigation that's already been running for some time, or for a few years. But now this allows us to take a significant move forward in terms of pace. And we were always tied to the public inquiry, but the scale of it is the sheer number of victims involved. We've got, we think over 3,000 people affected in some way by Horizon in this manner. So it's huge. So we've got to put in the commensurate numbers of officers to start moving it at pace.
Well, our Money and Work reporter Peter Ruddock is here on his specialist subject. Hello, Peter.
Hello, Chris.
This feels like a big moment.
Yeah, I think it is a moment. It's not the beginning of these police investigations, but it feels like a sort of a handover, if you like, from the inquiry, or the beginning of a handover from the inquiry to the police when it comes to who is responsible for chasing justice for the victims in this. And I guess we learned a bit about the scale, a bit about the direction of travel, and a bit about the timeline. So briefly on the scale, you heard the commander there say more than 3,000 victims, those 1.5 million documents, dozens of persons of interest so far. That's the first time we've heard that. Potential suspects, broadly, that's what that means. Now, police have already interviewed, as you say, 3 people under caution. They are telling us that they plan to interview more in 2025, and 100 officers across the UK, because, of course, these offences occurred across the UK if there were offences, if there were criminal offences. On the direction of travel, so the police are talking about phases. So sort of phase 1 is looking at the action of investigators, solicitors, barristers, legal professionals, people who work with the post office and people who work with Fujitsu. And then in phase 2, they'll look at people involved in sort of wider decision making, code perhaps for executives at these organisations. And then on the timeline, they're basically waiting for the inquiry to finish, to report, and then for that report to be thoroughly reviewed before they decide if anyone can or should be charged. We expect the inquiry to report next year, so we're looking at 2026 before potential, if there are any charging decisions, and then 2027, as you say, before anyone may or may not go to trial.
I mean, that feels a long way off.
Yeah, it does.
Given it's been a long time for these people to get justice in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it is a long time. The police have got a few things to say on that when we were chatting to them yesterday ahead of this. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of evidence to go through, right, which they have explained. And the process for that is interesting. So they don't automatically get access to everything the inquiry gets access to at the same time. So they only get access to it when it gets made public. But they've been watching every day of the inquiry, so they have been requesting key documents that they don't have at the points where they need to. But they say that the inquiry has to sort of be independent. So they've got to wait for that process to be fully completed before any charges can be brought. But they also make the point that the wrongful prosecutions of the sub-postmasters were brought about by legal issues, by wrongful disclosure of documents, by rash decisions, by people who weren't potentially working within the law as they should have. That means that they, the police, really have to be as thorough as possible in their investigations to make sure that if there are cases that can go to trial, that those can't be picked apart for legal reasons, especially if the cases you're bringing are against legal problems, if that makes sense. So that they, obviously there's a high evidential bar. They always need to jump, but they really want to make sure these are proper, thorough investigations. It's not going to stop, of course, the criticism that, justice delayed is justice denied.
Let's get the reaction from one victim of the scandal, Timothy Brentnall, who's a former sub-postmaster who received an update from the police ahead of today's announcement. Timothy, hi.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thank you for joining us. What are your thoughts on today's announcement then?
Well, myself and speaking for the group of sub postmasters that I keep in contact with, we welcome it because we've been waiting for justice to come. Initially, we thought the inquiry would lead us down that road, but as you learn, the way inquiries work, that will just report, and then it's up to the police to pick up after the inquiry report.
And that process that Peter just took us through, does that all make perfect sense to you, despite how long it might take to reach a conclusion in the courts?
Yeah, it makes sense. It doesn't stop it being frustrating and upsetting to all of us involved. If I speak personally for a second, when I was audited by the Post Office, I had to find some £20,000 to pay them back within a week to avoid a theft charge to start with, and then within a few weeks I was charged with false accounting. It all happens very quickly, and you're caught up in a whirlwind of a system that you've not dealt with before and you don't really understand, and it seems to happen very quickly. I was part of Alan's group action in 2019 when the judge found in our favour in all the cases we brought. My conviction was quashed in 2021. So you're talking from those points, either 5 years or 3 years have passed since those major timelines, and nothing criminally seems to have happened to the people that did this to us. But the police were very keen to stress that point that Peter was just talking about, that they really have to ensure that they build cases that are sort of watertight.
Absolutely.
And if that takes 12, 18 months, then looking at it pragmatically, we have to wait and allow them to build those cases, because it was justice wasn't followed properly when we were prosecuted. And we really want to see people brought to justice over this.
Absolutely understood. Just before you go, there was obviously so much conversation around the redress and compensation that was owed to people like yourself, Timothy. Where are you with that? Have you received any kind of payment from the government yet?
I've had what they call an interim payment, which was very welcome and has allowed me to clear debts and not be worried about where next week's food shop or heating oil bill might be coming from. My full claim went in a few months ago, and despite what the government and the Post Office say about giving us the benefit of the doubt and giving us full and fair redress, the first offer that I had back recently from them was below 20% of my claim.
Below 20%? And is that similar to the other people who you say you're in close conversation with? Yeah,
so I keep in touch with people in various schemes. I have an overturned conviction, so I'm in that scheme. Other people might be in what they call the historic shortfall scheme, which are sort of geared slightly differently. But the offers across all schemes seem to be coming in somewhere between that 15 and 30%, which, when we've spent over 12 months building our claims, going through everything with forensic accountants and psychologists and really making sure our claims are as in order as they can be, it feels like we're still in litigation, because every word that can be picked on or skewed to give a different view to how we meant to present it, they are pulling our claims apart and coming in with very, very minimised offers.
So do you just find, do you fear even more back and forth on that then? You're going to have to fight your corner yet again?
Yeah, it feels like, they promised that we would all be sorted out by Christmas. That's not going to happen, and it's going to be months or years going down the line. And what worries us is that the inquiry have been looking at compensation, and with the wave of public support that we've had this year, it's been kept very much on the agenda. But with the inquiry now closing, and with how the police work very much in the background while they build these cases, we're all very worried that our fight will be allowed to slip under the radar, and we'll be back in the position where we feel we're really sort of up against it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the best of luck, Timothy, and thank you for talking to us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
Timothy Brentnell, former sub-postmaster there, with that update on the police investigation. But as you can hear, still a lot of frustration around the redress and compensation issue as well. And thank you to you as well, Peter. It's coming up to 4:30.
Now, there's been some big World Cup news.